There is a tree in your neighbor's backyard that can produce 200 fruits every single year for a century without replanting. Each fruit weighs up to 6 kilograms. That is 1,200 kilograms of food from one tree per year for generations. The fruit contains more fiber than whole wheat pasta, more potassium than potatoes, complete protein that your body actually absorbs better than wheat, not per serving, per 100 grams, 2.5 times the fiber, twice the potassium, not per pound, per serving. For 3,000 years, Pacific Islanders built entire civilizations on this single tree. And today, most of the world forgot it exists. The tree is breadfruit, and somebody really did not want you to know what it could do. This is its story. You are watching Buried Harvest. We uncover the foods, knowledge, and systems buried by history and industry. Every episode, we open one more forgotten vault. If you want access to the full archive, subscribe now. This is today's Buried Harvest. Let me show you what they erased. The archive opens in the year 1000 Anno Domini, somewhere in the Society Islands. A Polynesian grandmother teaches her granddaughter the thing empires fear most, how to be free. She points to the massive tree shading their coastal village, the tree her grandmother planted 7 decades before she was born, still fruiting, still feeding 20 people, still requiring almost no labor. Plant once, harvest for a lifetime, pass it to your children, repeat forever. That should not be possible. Annual crops demand replanting every season. Labor, seeds, cleared land, dependence on whoever controls the seed supply. Control through scarcity. But breadfruit breaks that cycle. You plant a cutting. 3 years later, fruit appears. Then 50 fruits per year. Then 100. Then 200. For 50 years. For a century. Some trees still producing after generations. One tree feeding 4 people with complete nutrition. This was not subsistence. This was abundance. So much abundance that Pacific Islanders developed over 2,000 names for different breadfruit varieties across hundreds of islands. They did not need 2,000 names for famine food. They needed 2,000 names because they had the luxury to be particular about flavor, about texture, about when it ripened, about how it cooked. They bred seedless varieties because seeds got in the way of eating. They took breadnut from New Guinea and Polynesia and selectively bred it into something that did not need pollination to fruit. Parthenogenesis, virgin birth for food. Then they carried those trees in canoes across 3,000 miles of open ocean and planted them on every island they settled. Marquesas, Tahiti, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, Pohnpei, Hawaii, not as backup food, as primary staple. The foundation crop that made everything else possible. The tree that liberated labor. The archive opens again, this time in volcanic soil. Temwen Island, Pohnpei, Micronesia. Archaeologists excavate what looks like random pits scattered across the landscape. They expected garbage dumps. They expected burial sites. What they found instead stopped everyone. These were not pits. These were refrigerators. Industrial-scale food storage from prehistory, fermentation pits, lined with leaves, filled with peeled breadfruit, buried. The fruit would ferment over weeks into a paste that lasted over a year. Some pits produced edible food 20 years after burial. No refrigeration, no canning, no additives, just leaves and time and the biochemistry they understood without laboratories. At Moorea in the Society Islands, archaeologists found carbonized breadfruit skin in a late prehistoric house site. They were roasting it over fire, eating it daily. On Rapa Nui, they found breadfruit starch on obsidian tools dated to 1,300 Anno Domini. The earliest human settlement layers, they brought it with them. This was not decorative. This was infrastructure. Breadfruit agroforestry protected mountain slopes from erosion for 2 millennia. The roots held the soil. The canopy shaded taro and yams. The trees required almost no care. No annual plowing. No fertilizer. No pesticides, just sunlight and rain and the nitrogen they fix from air into soil. They pollinated themselves through fruit bats. They propagated through root suckers that sprouted when the parent tree was damaged. Cut the tree down and 5 more grew back. The Polynesians had a saying, "The more you chop breadfruit root, the more it springs." It was a metaphor for resilience, but it was also literal agricultural instruction. This was not luck. This was 3,000 years of selection pressure, creating the most efficient perennial staple crop ever domesticated. 50 kilograms of edible carbohydrate per tree. 100 kilograms. 200 kilograms. 400 kilograms in exceptional years. From one tree occupying 20 square meters for decades. With near zero labor input after establishment, rice requires annual flooding and planting. Wheat requires plowing and sowing. Corn exhausts soil without rotation. Breadfruit just grows. That makes it valuable. That also makes it dangerous. Dangerous to anyone whose power depends on controlling the food supply, on selling seeds, on yearly dependence, on scarcity creating markets. Enter the British Empire. The year is 1787. King George III has a problem. Caribbean sugar plantations are generating enormous wealth. But enslaved Africans need food. Imported food costs money. Sir Joseph Banks has a solution. Banks sailed with Captain Cook to Tahiti in 1769. He saw breadfruit, massive yields, no replanting, nutritious, perfect slave food, cheap food, self-propagating food, food that would grow in the Caribbean exactly like it grew in Tahiti, food that would maximize profit by minimizing cost. Banks lobbied the king, offered cash bounties and gold medals for successful transport. The Admiralty commissioned HMS Bounty, converted the captain's cabin into a floating greenhouse for 1,000 plants. Lieutenant William Bligh commanded. His mission was not exploration. It was extraction. Bring breadfruit from Tahiti to Jamaica. Feed the enslaved. Increase plantation output. Serve the empire. April 28, 1789. 3 weeks after leaving Tahiti with 1,015 potted breadfruit plants, Fletcher Christian leads the mutiny. Bligh and 18 loyalists go overboard into a 23-foot open boat with 16 chunks of salt pork and 6 quarts of rum. 3,600 miles from land, the mutineers threw every single breadfruit plant into the ocean. Bligh navigated to Timor using a pocket watch and a sextant. Survived. Returned to England a hero, and 2 years later the Admiralty sent him back for more breadfruit. HMS Providence, 1791. This time Bligh collected 2,126 plants. 678 survived the voyage. He delivered them to Jamaica in 1793. The ship arrived, described as a floating forest. 346 trees planted at Bath Botanic Garden. The rest distributed across Caribbean plantations. Mission accomplished. Cheap food secured. Except the enslaved Africans refused to eat it. They fed it to pigs. They preferred plantain bananas. Breadfruit tasted unfamiliar, bland, wrong. It took 40 years before Jamaicans accepted it. 40 years. By 1834, slavery was abolished. By then, breadfruit had become beloved, roasted, fried, mashed with coconut milk and spices into dishes that rivaled any staple, but it was incomplete. It never became commercial, never scaled, never replaced the annual crops that required yearly seed purchases and fertilizer and pesticide and dependence. It remained a backyard tree, something grandmothers grew, something you ate at home but never exported, something abundant but not profitable, something free but not valued. Half the world never forgot. Pacific Islanders still call it ulu in Hawaii and Samoa, May in Micronesia, Uto in Fiji, Sukun in Indonesia, Panapane in Puerto Rico. The other half was taught to worship rice, to import wheat, to depend on annual grains that demanded purchase and labor and turned abundance into scarcity by design. So here is what nobody tells you. Let me tell you what is actually inside 100 grams of breadfruit. About half a cup cooked, 4.9 grams of fiber. That is 25% of your daily requirement. Whole wheat pasta gives you 6 grams per cooked cup. Breadfruit gives you 10. That is not 2% more. That is 67% more fiber. 2.5 times what pasta delivers. In a naturally gluten-free starch that grows on trees, 490 milligrams of potassium per 100 grams. Potatoes give you about half that. Breadfruit delivers twice the potassium in the same serving. Not 1% more. Double than the protein. 1 gram per 100 grams does not sound like much until you understand it is complete protein. All essential amino acids present. Valine, isoleucine, phenylalanine, leucine. Studies show breadfruit protein digests better than wheat protein. The Ma'afala variety contains a higher percentage of essential amino acids than soybeans. Soybeans, the protein everybody worships. 29 milligrams of vitamin C. That is 48% of your daily requirement from a starch. Rice has none. Potatoes have some, but less. Breadfruit outperforms both beta-carotene and lutein, carotenoids that protect against vitamin A deficiency and age-related vision loss. White rice contains 0 carotenoids. White potatoes contain 0. Breadfruit contains both. The glycemic index sits at 60 to 65. Medium, lower than wheat, lower than white rice. The high amylose content slows glucose absorption. Diabetics manage better on breadfruit than refined grains. But it gets stranger. Fermented breadfruit produces short-chain fatty acids that lower cholesterol production. The fermentation creates both prebiotics and probiotics. Symbiotic food. Gut health encoded in tradition. Ancient Polynesians did not have laboratories. They did not sequence genomes. They did not measure glycemic indexes. But they knew. 3,000 years of selection pressure taught them what worked. They did not have a word for diabetes. They did not need one. Their staple crop regulated blood sugar naturally, while delivering complete nutrition and fiber that modern grains systematically bred out. So here's the question nobody wants to answer. If breadfruit delivers superior fiber, superior potassium, complete protein, and lower glycemic impact than the grains we import and subsidize and worship, why is it rotting in backyards instead of feeding continents? Why did Captain Bligh bring it for slaves and nobody revisited it for humanity? Why does rice dominate the tropics? The answer is not nutritional. The answer is structural. Breadfruit threatens every assumption underlying industrial agriculture. It exposes the lie that annual crops are efficient, that monoculture is productive, that dependence on seed companies and fertilizer corporations and yearly replanting is necessary. Breadfruit proves you can plant once and eat forever. That terrifies the entire system. You cannot sell breadfruit seeds every year. The trees propagate from root cuttings. You plant one tree, and it sends up suckers that become 5 trees. You cannot sell fertilizer easily. The trees fix nitrogen. They improve soil instead of exhausting it. They require minimal inputs after establishment. Just rain and sun. You cannot spray it with herbicides branded for annual grains. It is a tree. It lives decades. You cannot clear the field yearly and charge for inputs. You cannot mechanize harvesting efficiently. The trees grow 50 to 80 feet tall. Fruit ripens and falls. You need people or poles, not combines, not economies of scale. You cannot standardize easily. Caribbean farmers still have only 2 varieties from what Captain Bligh brought in 1793. White and yellow. That is it. 2 varieties for 2 centuries. Meanwhile, the Breadfruit Institute in Hawaii conserves 120 varieties, different flavors, different textures, different ripening seasons, different yields. But that diversity never reached commercial systems. You cannot patent ancient cultivars easily. They are public domain, vegetatively propagated for millennia. No intellectual property to extract. No genetic modification to license. Just trees that reproduce themselves? You cannot create markets based on scarcity. One mature tree produces 50 to 200 fruits per year. For 50 years? For a century. That is abundance. Abundance destroys markets. They did not suppress it through conspiracy. They suppressed it through neglect. No research funding. No commercial breeding programs. No marketing campaigns. No fast food integration. No lobbying groups. Just quiet institutional preference for crops that require purchase. That fit existing machinery. That concentrate power in seed companies and agrochemical corporations and commodity traders who profit from dependence. The younger generation in the Pacific now rejects breadfruit for imported rice. Rice seems modern. Breadfruit seems old-fashioned. The fact that it thrives with no care adds to its perceived low value. Ironic. The crop that requires zero inputs gets valued at zero, while rice that demands irrigation, planting fertilizer, and yearly purchase gets worshipped as civilization. That inversion is not accidental. Current breadfruit exports from the entire Caribbean total about 1,000 tons per year. Samoa exports 100 tons. Fiji exports 100 tons. The whole Pacific combined exports barely enough to matter. Meanwhile, studies show potential yields of 6.7 to 13.4 tons per acre. One tree alone produces up to 400 kilograms. 50 trees per acre could feed thousands. But here is what they could not erase. The breadfruit itself, the knowledge itself, the trees still standing in backyards from Hawaii to Jamaica to Indonesia to Mozambique, still fruiting, still waiting. Knowledge does not die, as long as one grandmother still teaches one grandchild how to recognize when the latex drops appear on the skin, when to harvest, how to roast. In Hawaii, they call it ulu and fry it into chips exported to California. In Samoa, they still ferment it in leaf-lined pits, using methods unchanged for millennia. In Puerto Rico, they mash it with garlic and chicharrón into mofongo de panapane. Not famine food. Premium cuisine. Celebration food. The kind you serve when family gathers. In Jamaica, it is beloved now. Roasted until the skin blackens and the flesh inside steams soft. Eaten with ackee and saltfish. The national dish, paired with the tree Britain brought for slaves. In Indonesia, they call it sukun. In the Philippines, rimas. In Fiji, udo. In Micronesia, may. 51 vernacular names documented in the Caribbean alone. 9 of those names recorded for the first time recently. That means the knowledge was still there. Still being transmitted. Still evolving. Oral tradition preserving what institutions abandoned. Grandmothers doing what universities would not. Remembering, but it was incomplete. Half the knowledge survived in the Pacific. Half survived in the Caribbean. But nobody connected them. Nobody scaled them. Nobody told the world this tree could end hunger. Nobody mentioned that one tree lives 50 to 100 years producing food. That it survives hurricanes when annual crops fail. That it requires no replanting, no fertilizer, no pesticides. Nobody mentioned that it is naturally gluten-free with complete protein and more fiber than wheat pasta. Nobody mentioned 3,000 years of proof. That moment is now. That vault opens today. So here is what you do. If you live in the tropics, find a breadfruit tree. They grow in 90 countries. Backyard trees. Neglected trees. Trees nobody harvests. Recognize it by the massive lobed leaves and the bumpy green fruits covered in hexagonal discs. Each disc marks where a flower was. 1,500 to 2,000 flowers per fruit. Wait until latex droplets appear on the skin. That signals maturity. Pick it. Drain the latex. Roast it whole in an oven like a potato or peel it in fry slices. The unripe fruit tastes like bread when cooked. Starchy. Filling. Potato-like. The ripe fruit turns sweet. Custard texture. Eat it raw or mashed with coconut milk. Both stages are safe. Just cook it first if unripe. Do not eat raw seeds from seeded varieties. They are bitter and unsafe. But the seedless varieties have no seeds. Just pure edible flesh. If you have space, plant a cutting. Root suckers. They establish in 3 years. Then fruit for your lifetime. For your children's lifetime. For your grandchildren, one decision. Generational food security. Reclaim the name that Joseph Banks tried to weaponize. Reclaim the tree that empires tried to commodify. Reclaim the abundance that industrial agriculture tried to erase by calling it inefficient. Every person who plants breadfruit is one more proof that perennial staples work, that food systems do not require annual dependence, that abundance threatens no one except those profiting from scarcity. The tree Polynesians engineered, the tree Britain exploited, the tree slavery rejected then embraced, the tree that grows in your neighbor's yard producing 200 fruits nobody harvests, 3,000 years cultivated, 2 centuries commercialized nowhere, one tree still fruiting, still liberating, still feeding anyone willing to remember what empires spent fortunes trying to make you forget. It can feed you.